going for too much, but all right. Well, good evening, everybody. I see we're all here, and here is where it's at. Welcome to online session number 2. Now, if I can only, there you go. Wow, this is working out great. Okay, yes, we have an agenda as we did last week. We have our guest speaker, Paige Roberts. She is the president and CEO of Jackson County Chamber of Commerce. Then, time permitting, I will share some content with you regarding transformational leadership. It's really not something covered in your readings, or it may be in some of your article reviews and that sort of thing, but it has a direct impact and relevance to change and leading change in organizations. If Paige allows me, I'll even talk a little bit about the 3-part change framework that I think she's going to talk about a little bit and share her stories with us. Then I would like to spend a little time with you, talk about your personal change challenge update, or you tell me about your change challenge. And then we'll go through some upcoming events. So that's it, nice and tight. So first, our guest speaker. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to open up Paige's biography and have her note taker handy so that you can do what you have to do later on with the discussion board and take care of that. But Paige, I'm not going to read this, guys.
Oh, thank you.
You should have read it, whatever. You should by now. Anyway, but here's what I will say. I had the privilege of meeting Paige when I had spent a little time with the Pathways to Possibilities panel team a few years ago when it first started up, and I was so impressed by just her nature and how dynamic she was, and the group and the actual work of the Pathways to Possibilities, and how well that turned out. That I always had Paige in mind. Should I ever teach a live course anywhere with the University of Southern Mississippi? And we had Paige last year as our guest speaker doing change, and she did such a wonderful job. Asked her to come back this time. So without any further delay, Paige, the floor is yours. Wait, everyone else, mute your mics while Paige is up, okay? Until she's ready for you to unmute and ask questions or what have you.
Thank you, John. And it's a pleasure to be here again. I hate that it's virtual, two-dimensional, but I'm thrilled to have the opportunity nonetheless. My background is sort of circuitous on how I get here. So I don't know if any of you are old enough to have known a movie with Gina Davis and I believe William Hurt called The Accidental Tourist. Well, I am the accidental CEO. I'm really a journalist. And that is what my degree, my Bachelor of Journalism degree from the University of Missouri, is what led me to the Mississippi Gulf Coast with WLOX. There's a pretty decent pipeline between the Mizzou School of Journalism and WLOX. Still, Brad Kessie, the news director, the assistant news director, the assignment editor, there's a whole host of them. And they call us the Mizzou Mafia because we're in just about every newsroom across the country, whether print or broadcast. So I'm really a journalist who then ended up teaching journalism, running the Red Cross, just in time for Katrina. That's how Carlos Bell, your classmate, became my ride or die. And then running Pathways, creating and running Pathways to Possibilities, the Career Expo for 8th graders. And now here I am, the president and CEO, which is a really big title, but sort of inflated, like the size of my office, quite frankly. But anyway, so I'm especially pleased that John asked me to talk about change leadership because I like change leadership. I like the idea of changing things for the better. So I thought I would start with the end in mind. You get extra credit points if you know what author says that, starting with the end in mind. But here are the takeaways. Yes, very good. Yeah, you get the points, John. You who didn't need them. Okay, so so these are the 4 takeaways that I want you to see or hear. And if you don't hear them, then let me know at the end. So the 4 main things about change leadership is, number 1, that you have to study the situation. So you can't go in and make change without really having not just a broad, but a deep a deep understanding of what's going on. And so you really have to study. And it's not just on the surface, which I liken to demographics. For example, when I was with Red Cross, I was a part of a national team called the Advanced Public Affairs team. So we're like a rapid response. We're sort of the communications ninjas of American Red Cross. And we get deployed all around the country to drop into communities where there are high visibility disasters. Because we are highly trained to handle national media and to handle sort of sticky wickets, if you will, about relationships, liaison relationships, whether they be with government or other nonprofits or the private sector, whatever it may be, the communities. So we also handle VIPs. So for example, I was deployed to Bastrop, Texas, which is right outside of Austin, to handle the national media for a wildfire that had happened several years ago. So I have less than 24 hours to then figure out this community as much as I can before I get there. And then once I get there, so you're looking at demographics, but I use this example because you're also looking at dynamics. So you have the demographics, which you study, the statistics and sort of what everybody looks like and what categories they fall into. But when you get there on the ground, you're looking at the dynamics, like who's really in charge. And this is the case whether you're dropping down out of the sky into a disaster zone, or whether you're going into a company or an organization with an org chart. Because the org chart, I would liken to the demographics, that's sort of a factual thing on paper, but the dynamics is who's really in charge, right? Like, who are your real influencers? The title versus the reality. So that's what I mean by studying a situation. You really need to know what's what and who's who and why, how they're connected, and the whys behind all of it. So it should come as no surprise that for a long time, when I was in the 6th grade, I thought I was Nancy Drew reincarnated. So it's a real investigative type thing. So study is the first one. The second one is trust. And we're talking about, again, relationships, about, okay, you need to establish trust. You need to figure out who to trust. And you also need to figure out, again, in your study, you're finding out who the real influencers are, and you're getting them to trust you, because when they trust you, they're serving as a bridge to the next group, right? So when you're trying to lead change, you are trying to basically get everybody on the bandwagon, right? For whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So it's a lot like advertising. It's a lot like sales or marketing. If you know anything about those fields and the psychology of getting people to buy things, or targeting certain market populations, all of that is very helpful. Those are very helpful tools in leading change. And again, I cannot stress enough relationships. It is so important that you are real and genuine with people, so that there is a strong connection of trust, so that they will follow you into battle. Because the worst thing about thinking you're a leader is proclaiming you're a leader, but looking back behind you and nobody's following, because that does not make you a leader. So again, what's on the paper and what's actually going on, you constantly have to be checking that. And so trust is the second thing. The third thing that goes along with that is buy-in. And so again, in your study time, when you are figuring out who the influencers are, you're also figuring out who the stakeholders are, and that you're being as thorough as possible about who really holds the stake. I mean, I know it seems obvious that that's what a stakeholder is, but you have to think of all the different stakes that people could have, or groups of people could have in your organization, or in your effort, whatever it is that you're trying to change. So when you identify those stakeholders, you have to get buy-in. So that's again where you start to use those influencers who trust you. I'm going to use an example from my journalism days. When a journalist is looking for somebody to interview, and let's say it's a harder interview to get, and not just a typical grandstander, or somebody that really is seeking out the limelight, but you want to get an interview with somebody who doesn't know you, doesn't know anything about you, and might be, for whatever reason, challenging you can't just call them up and they'll give you an interview. So you find an ambassador, right? You find somebody who knows you, who knows them, and then because that person can vouch for you as the journalist, and then that person trusts the person in the middle, that's how you get together. And quite frankly, you don't have to be a journalist looking for an interview for that to work. As John mentioned in Pathways to Possibilities, we created this event, and we needed a lot of people to be able to participate in it and to make it happen. That's what we did. We found people who knew people, who knew people, who knew people. And let me tell you, that is why I love Mississippi, because Mississippi has only 2 degrees of separation, not 6, like a lot of the other places. And Carlos knows exactly what I'm talking about. This state is so great because it is small, in the sense that there are only 2.9 million people in population. Now, it takes a good 6 or so hours to get from top to bottom, but this state, if you're looking for somebody, it does not take long to find them. And so that works wonderfully. And especially after you've been hit by the biggest natural disaster in the history. So that's the getting the buy-in and using those relationships is important, because if you don't get buy-in, if you can't sell your reason for change or sell your change, then you're not going to accomplish very much. And I will say that probably is the biggest reason for failure in accomplishing a change effort, because you didn't get the buy-in. I'm actually in the midst of a situation right now that sort of perplexes me, where we have an organization, a nonprofit group. It's a group that is internationally known, that's just women, and their whole mission is to empower women, and they do so through college scholarships for high school senior graduating females. And so they put on this event every year in Pascagoula. The problem is that this particular organization, like a lot of associations now, is struggling because they're aging out. You know, they're the same women who have been running this festival for the last 40 years aren't going to be around another 40 years. Fortunately, they came to me recognizing this, and they said, hey, do you think the chamber would partner with us to try to, you know, what I call give a B12, a B12 shot to this event, to kind of take it to the next level, because our membership is dwindling, and we realize we're not going to be here forever, which is good, because when I tell you these women are older, they are older. And so, there's just no question that they're taking this to the next 40 years. They're not. So, so the problem so I said to them, yes, that my staff and I would explore this partnership, but that they would have to be open to changes. So you then have to start asking yourself, is there such a thing as too much change all at once? Now, I'm the type of person, John and Carlos can probably attest, that I'm a go big or go home. Not everybody approaches things like that. And there are pros and cons to go big and go home, and there are pros and cons to sort of inching your way in, and there are appropriate times for either one. So right now, it's about the venue for this event, and so they're telling me, for example, oh, well, we can't change the street that we host this on this year, because we promised our vendors 2 years ago, because we didn't have it last year because of the pandemic. We promised our vendors 2 years ago that they would have certain spaces on this particular street. Well, to me, I'm like, really? Is that a hill you want to die on, that you promised vendors 2 years ago, instead of just approaching them and saying, hey, we think this street is better and this is why? So I'm now sort of detecting a little bit of resistance, and so I'm playing with how firm I should be in knowing that I do know more than they do about event planning and about community building, and trying to get them comfortable with trusting me, because in the end, isn't it a trust factor? If they really knew me well, then they would trust me to do whatever, they'd let me do whatever I wanted. quite frankly. But this particular group of women, they don't all really, any of them know me really well, but they obviously knew to come to me. So it's just an example of where even I, the guest lecturer on change leadership, am struggling with how much change and how much do I put, how firm am I with Granny, and that kind of thing. So yeah, because I Granny is going to be hesitant, right? So I have to say to myself, what motivates Granny? What fears does Granny have? What hesitations is she going to have, or what's really gonna cause her to move forward and get her to where I need to be? And so then it just then becomes, do I really want to exert the patience to make that happen? So we'll see how this goes. Maybe next year's class will benefit from what's about to happen in this case. So buy-in is huge. And then the fourth one I think is very important is to review. When you are going into change efforts, you do need to be open yourself to what's working and what's not working, and you need to listen. And I would say that for leadership, any type of leadership. I saw a quote once that's been attributed to a couple different people, but so it doesn't really matter who said it, but what they said was, it takes courage to stand up and speak out, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen. And I think that real listening is an art that is dying. It is, I would put it on the, what's it called? The endangered species list. Yes, I would put listening and communication, true communication, effective communication, on an endangered species list, if there were such a thing. And so I do want to talk about communication for just a minute. Communication is key always, and how you communicate is so important. We have more communication tools at our fingertips than we have ever had as mankind. We have more ways to communicate than ever before. And yet, our communication skills are growing worse and worse. So the more ways we have to communicate, the less effective we are communicating. And I find this to be sort of, I hate it. It just drives me nuts. And also what I think is, very interesting is, at the same time, we've come full circle back to the caveman days with hieroglyphics in the Egyptian days, because emojis are essentially hieroglyphics. And so we're just now communicating with little art pieces. I mean, someone sent me a text just a little while ago, and it was a really mad face, and then it was a sad face. Now, it turned out he had also sent a news story with it, but I hadn't seen the news story. So all I get is an angry face and a sad face. So I immediately pick up the phone and I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Now, sadly, one of the FBI officers who was killed in Florida was one of his former FBI friends. So I understand the angry emoji and the sad emoji. I want you to remember this quote, and this quote was by George Bernard Shaw. Any of you who know, he wrote Pygmalion, which became My Fair Lady, and The Rain in Spain Falls Mainly on the Plain. So George Bernard Shaw said this about communication: the single biggest problem with communication, is the illusion that it has taken place. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Now, raise your hand if you have been there. And if I was going to say, because, and there are all kinds of things that can be said about males and females, but their ability to communicate is not known for its great success stories. And so if you've been in a relationship ever, you've definitely had that happen. It doesn't have to be a romantic one, but just interacting with other humans. Oh, it just so keep that in mind. And so when I say review is the fourth thing, so communication takes a receiver and a sender. So the message that gets sent has to be received in the way that it's intended. So the listening has to go right, and then the listener needs to get back. So that's it's a very simple formula. And when I'm teaching it to high school kids, when I guest lecture for them, I usually use a quarterback as the sender and the wide receiver as the receiver, and the football is the message, right? I mean, because that's how simple it is. But how much do we F that up, right? I mean, we can really mess up some communication. Okay, so books that I want to talk about. Okay, books on change leadership. Your professor mentioned one earlier, my all-time favorite. I'm like, there's several leaders in our community over here in Jackson County who have also read it. I cannot recommend it enough. It is called Switch by the brothers, Chip and Dan Heath. The subtitle is How to Change Things When Change is Hard. And I'm going to wrap up before questions in just a few minutes with a couple examples from that book. Another book is Tipping Point. If some of you may be familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point is very important because he talks about influencers in there. And I'll tell you the most memorable story he tells or uses in Tipping Point is the one on Paul Revere. Many people, well, there are people in New England, of course, where Paul Revere is from, who know this, but I would argue most Americans do not know that there were two, even a third one, but there were two writers that night, Paul Revere and another one. But we don't ever, nobody can spit out the name of the other one, right? But we all know who Paul Revere is. Well, the Malcolm Gladwell argues that in his research, the reason why Paul Revere was so well known and so successful is that he was already an influencer in his community. People already went to him for information and to find things out. And remember, knowledge is power. And information, I know this from my disaster work, information is just, now good information, mind you, factual, accurate information is just as needed, just as necessary and critical to people as food, shelter, and clothing, because that is what helps calm them, what helps keep them, keep the anxiety at bay. And that is why, in my example with American Red Cross, getting information out to people about where you can get help, what help looks like, what is normal, what is normal to be experiencing or feeling in an abnormal situation. That is so key. And so when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he did include a sense of belonging, but I think he needs to add information, accurate information. And that is also key in change leadership, because when change is going on, the rumor mill will it will get really stirred up because people are like, oh, did you hear? I heard this, I heard that. And that is why keeping people informed from the same consistent, trusted source so that there aren't these little pockets of misinformation that people are believing instead of you. I cannot stress that enough either. So that's quite critical. So tipping point. So we talked about switch. We talked about tipping point. The third book, I'm just going to admit, I haven't even read yet, but in a conversation I had today with my good friend, Wayne Rodolfich, who is the superintendent of the Pascagoula Goche school districts and a change leader himself. He finished reading it and was actually on his way to Barnes and Noble to buy up the last copies. So don't go to Barnes and Noble in Gulfport for it, because he always gets books for his principals and administrators. They sort of have a book club thing. It's called Change, and it's by Damon, D-A-M-O-N, Centola, C-E-N-T-O-L-A, and it's about it talks about Black Lives Matter, how that goes from a little hashtag to a huge societal movement. But Change, this book, I'm so excited that Wayne told me about it. And excuse me, he said, now he didn't offer me a copy, mind you. He did say I could go by his office and thumb through it before I talk to you guys. I'm getting a copy. So I can tell already in just the little bit that I heard and read about it, that that's going to be an important one. So I'm timing myself here. John, do you want me to go straight into questions, or do you want me, I was going to do a little thing from Switch. It's totally up to you. I'm good either way.
Do your thing.
Okay. All right. So these, I know you're not third graders, but I'm going to read to you anyway, because these are a couple anecdotes here. The great thing about Switch is that they approach change in a three method way, and that is it's about elephants. You direct the rider, you motivate the elephant, and you shape the path. Those are the three keys that they give for change. All right. So and what I just think is brilliant is how obvious some of this stuff is, and you don't even think about it, because here's what I want you to be listening for, is they're drilling down to what the real change that's needed is. And you'll hear what I mean as I share this with you. One Saturday in the year 2000, some unsuspecting moviegoers showed up at a suburban theater in Chicago to catch a matinee of Mel Gibson's action flick Payback. They were handed a soft drink and a free bucket of popcorn and were asked to stick around after the movie to answer a few questions about the concession stand. These movie fans were unwitting participants in a study of irrational eating behavior. There was something unusual about the popcorn they received. It was wretched. In fact, it had been carefully engineered to be wretched. It had been popped 5 days earlier and was so stale it squeaked when you ate it. One moviegoer later compared it to styrofoam packing peanuts, and two others, forgetting that they had received the popcorn for free, asked for their money back. Some of them got their free popcorn in a medium-sized bucket, and others got a large bucket, the sort of huge tub that looks like it might once have been an above-ground swimming pool. Every person got a bucket, so there'd be no need to share. The researchers responsible for the study were interested in a simple question: would the people with bigger buckets eat more? Both buckets were so big that none of the moviegoers could finish their individual portions. So the actual research question was a bit more specific. Would somebody with a larger, inexhaustible supply of popcorn eat more than someone with a smaller, inexhaustible supply of popcorn. The sneaky researchers weighed the buckets before and after the movie, so they were able to measure precisely how much popcorn each person ate. The results were stunning. People with large buckets ate 53% more popcorn than people with the medium size. That's the equivalent of 173 more calories and approximately 21 extra hand dips into the popcorn bucket. Brian Wansink, the author of the study, runs the Food and Brand Lab at Cornell University, and he described the results in his book, Mindless Eating. We've run other popcorn studies and the results were always the same. However, we tweaked the details. It didn't matter if our moviegoers were from Pennsylvania, Illinois, or Iowa. And it didn't matter what kind of movie was showing. All of our popcorn studies led to the same conclusion. People eat more when you give them a bigger container, period. And by the way, I've tried this on myself at the movie theater, and it's very true. Whatever size popcorn I get is how much popcorn I eat. No other theory explains the behavior. These people weren't eating for pleasure. For God's sake, the popcorn was stale. Remember, it squeaked. They weren't driven by a desire to finish their portion. Both buckets were too big to finish. It didn't matter whether they were hungry or full. The equation is unyielding. Bigger container equals more eating. Best of all, people refuse to believe the results. After the movie, the researchers told the moviegoers about the two bucket sizes and the findings of their past research. The researchers asked, "Do you think you ate more because of the larger size?" The majority scoffed. "Oh, things like that don't trick me. Oh, I'm pretty good at knowing whether I'm full." Imagine that someone showed you the data from the popcorn eating study, but didn't mention the bucket sizes. On your data summary, you could quickly scan the results and see how much popcorn different people ate. Some ate a little, some ate a lot, some seemed to be testing the physical limits of the stomach. Armed with a data set like that, you would find it easy to jump to conclusions. Some people are reasonable snackers and others are big gluttons. A public health expert, for example, studying that data alongside you would likely get very worried about the gluttons. Oh, we need to motivate these people to adopt healthier snacking behaviors. Let's find ways to show them the health hazards of eating so much. But wait a second. If you want people to eat less popcorn, the solution is pretty simple. Give them smaller buckets. You don't have to worry about their knowledge or their attitudes. You can see how easy it would be to turn an easy change problem, such as shrinking people's buckets, into a hard change problem, convincing people to think differently. And that's the first surprise about change. What looks like a people problem is often a situation problem. And then the other one I want to share with you is something that I find very true, and I very admittedly see a therapist on a regular basis. And so my therapist and I talk about this study all the time, and you are going to know what I mean, whether you admit that you see a therapist or not. You are going to know why we talk about this in my sessions. All right, consider the behavior of some college students who participated in a study about food perception, or so they were told. They reported to the lab a bit hungry. They'd been asked not to eat for at least 3 hours beforehand. They were led to a room that smelled amazing. The researchers had baked chocolate chip cookies. On a table in the center of the room were 2 bowls. One held a sample of chocolates, along with the warm, fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies they had smelled. The other bowl held a bunch of radishes. The researchers had prepared a cover story. We've selected chocolates and radishes because they have highly distinctive tastes. Tomorrow, we'll contact you and ask about your memory of the taste sensations you experienced while eating them. Half the participants were asked to eat 2 or 3 cookies and some chocolate candies, but no radishes. The other half were asked to eat at least 2 or 3 radishes, but no cookies. While they ate, the researchers left the room, intending rather sadistically to induce temptation. They wanted those poor radish eaters to sit there alone, nibbling on rabbit food, glancing enviously at the fresh baked cookies that they could not eat. Of course, the cookie eaters didn't have any trouble not eating the radishes. Despite the temptation, all participants ate what they were asked to eat, and none of the radish eaters snuck a cookie. That's willpower. At that point, the taste study was officially over, and another group of researchers entered with a second, supposedly unrelated study. We're trying to find who is better at solving problems, college students or high school students. This framing was intended to get the college students to puff out their chests and take the forthcoming tasks seriously. The college students were presented with a series of puzzles that required them to trace a complicated geometric shape without retracing any lines and without lifting their pencils from the paper. They were given multiple sheets of paper so they could try over and over. In reality, the puzzles were designed to be unsolvable. The researchers wanted to see how long the college students would persist in a difficult, frustrating task before they finally gave up. The untempted students, so those were the ones who had been able to eat the chocolate chip cookies, spent 19 minutes on the task, making 34 well-intentioned attempts to solve the problem. The radish eaters were less persistent. They gave up after only 8 minutes, less than half the time spent by the cookie eaters, and they managed only 19 solution attempts. Why did they quit so easily? The answer may surprise you. They ran out of self-control. Self-control requires supervising yourself, and dozens of studies have demonstrated the exhausting nature of self-supervision. So when you hear people say that change is hard because people are lazy or resistant, that's just flat wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. Change is hard because people wear themselves out. And that's the second surprise about change. What looks like laziness is often exhaustion. And I won't read the third one to you for the sake of time, but the third story is about trying to motivate people in West Virginia, which happens to be a more obese state than Mississippi, to get them to lose weight. And they kept coming back to milk because there's so much fat in whole milk. And so they worked on just one thing: change your milk consumption to skim or 1% rather than whole milk, because it's really easy. This is where we make big mistakes. It's really easy to say, oh, we need to eat healthier. Oh, you need to eat healthier. That's going to lead to this, or that's going to lead to that, or this is going to cause this change in your life. To eat healthier is going to lead to a better life, a better quality of life. Well, what eating healthier means to you and what eating healthier means to me, and then what does it mean in the first place? So that's why you have to be crystal clear in your directions. So they took one thing: let's change their milk consumption and see what that does. And they were very successful. And that's a part of the book as well. So that's what I have for you, and I appreciate your attention. And I also will welcome gladly any questions that you may have.
I have a question
Carlos.
on the let me find my question. You talk about the start with the end in mind, and you
Uh-huh.
listed there were 3 key points of study, trust, buy-in, and review.
Mhm.
Paige, with your experience, which one of those can stand on its own?
Oh, of the study, trust, buy-in, and review.
In the situation that you gave us with an emergency situation where you're dropping in, which one
Oh,
of those?
as the communications ninja.
Yes.
Um, you know, if if I had to pick one, it would be trust. Yeah, because in the end, even if I didn't get any chance to study, let's say I fell asleep on the plane and I am rushed to get to the scene, even knowing nothing coming in, if I can build trust, I can get through it. I can learn as I go. Hopefully you're able to do all 4 of them if you're doing like I did at the chamber, which is restructure the entire organization, which led to everyone leaving me, quite frankly, by design. But they, I would say the longer term type situations, that's where you want to use all 4. If it comes right down to the rubber meeting the road, I would pick trust.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bless you, Gina.
I have a question for the when you're talking about being clear, right? The strategies, I think when you pair that with communication, I'm working on a project right now where everybody speaks in generalities, right? People don't, they don't ever really have a lot to say, but they say, a lot of words, right?
Oh.
So they think they're
Ever
communicating.
since Facebook, yeah.
Right. So when you're giving those directions about being clear, do you think that it's better to use like words like provide a strategy, or like are there certain words that you have found that work better? I mean, part of it is knowing who you're dealing with. I get that, but
right. I mean,
yeah,
that's
but being clear, it means nothing now.
well, yeah, well, of course, what I envision when you talk about those types of situations are, of course, politicians, right? When they're talking about, we want better schools. Okay, well, what does that mean? Like, so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And so you say, I want better schools. I want more extracurricular activities provided to all students. That's specific. And
Right.
then if you're going another step further, you say, I want, usually it involves forming a committee. I'm about small committees, but the next step is finding out what the extracurricular activities that are already offered, what are some popular ones from other schools, and then you figure out what the best fit is, and then what are the resources that are needed to make it happen, right? And so I think that's sort of the model, no matter what the situation is. But yeah, I mean, everybody wants good education. Everybody wants low crime. Everybody wants decent health care. But I mean,
Right.
and your point.
Right.
So yeah, that's and again, to reiterate your point, knowing your audience you know, I sort of laughed because when I was in journalism school, they told us write at an 8th grade level. And a younger journalist said to me the other day, she was taught 4th grade. I said, my God, in 20 years, we've lost 4 grades of intelligence for your average person. But yes, and you know, sometimes when I speak to high school kids, I usually am very self-deprecating about how lame I am and how lame my sons tell me and how I don't know cool words like woke and lit. But I also, and I know that a lot of polysyllabic words are not necessarily going to hit it with high school kids, but I will throw in a vocabulary word every once in a while, and I will like go over what it means. But sometimes I think that catches their attention if you're willing to, you know, I mean, you have to be aware that you're doing it. It certainly doesn't
Right.
help to have a PhD, no offense, John, could go into kindergartners and start speaking professorial language.
Right. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
How has your career, your background in journalism, helped you to become a more effective change agent?
Well, I always say that my training and experience in journalism has helped me with everything, especially because I went the broadcast route, the television route, and so you have these multiple deadlines all day long, and you've got to fit all the pieces together very quickly. How it helps me in change leadership is actually, I think, how it helps me in leadership, and that is I am able to understand, or I'm a big question asker. I know I drive people crazy sometimes with the questions that I ask, but I'm often asking questions of clarification. Because, and you know, when people use a bunch of pronouns, that's a perfect example. Okay, like which he are we talking about? Who's the they? Now what she? Oh, yeah. So I ask, I think it shows that I'm a more engaged participant in the conversation anyway, but I think that my ability to gather information, which is what a journalist does, really helps in the study phase of change leadership. And then I'm not only able to gather it, but I'm able to regurgitate it, to communicate it in a way that's easily understood. And quite frankly, that often has to do with alliteration. I didn't come up with this one, but an organization in Ocean Springs is starting this thing where they're not just staying in their building on their property, but they're going out into communities across the county, and they're calling that effort Mission in Motion. And I just love that, because our mission in motion tells me everything. It tells me that they're going to achieve their mission, and they're doing it by moving out into the communities. And so that's the kind of thing that, quite frankly, a journalist or an advertiser would think of. And that little phrases like that, pathways to possibilities that John and Carlos and I did together, I came up with a hashtag passion to paycheck. Hashtag passion to paycheck. So, because that's what we're trying to get the teenagers to understand their passion, and then how to connect it to a paycheck. And so that's, you know, a little alliteration thing. Yeah, there are a lot of lessons in poetry actually that help with the spoken word, because you know, broadcasting is writing to be heard, whereas newspaper or magazine is writing to be read. And those are two entirely different writing styles.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Jamil. I was a marketing and corporate relations major, so like public relations and advertising, that always like picks my brain. So
That's
with
because you can get into people's minds and mess with them.
So I wanted to know, within your time at the Red Cross as a communication ninja, as you call it, what was the shortest amount of time you had to study the dynamics of a situation before you had to speak and give a briefing like to the public? Because I know for me, I can read things, but it
Right.
takes me to a couple more. So I'm like, okay, what did I just read for me to comprehend? And then,
Right.
especially if you have to regurgitate it to the public, you have to have a good understanding for it. So I just wanted to know what was your shortest amount of time you had to study on the situation.
Yeah. I mean, one time that comes to mind was in New Mexico when the Los Alamos lab, property around that lab, actually a squirrel got electrocuted in a transformer and caused a fire, which then became a wildfire. And I remember just sort of like almost like waking up in this town hall meeting and having to speak. I mean, it was almost like I just got plopped into it was at church. I don't remember having a whole lot of time about that one. But I do remember about that one, what I did because I didn't have a lot of time. I did have a Red Cross friend who wasn't on that particular assignment, but he was from New Mexico. And so I did make a quick call to him to try to gain as much understanding as I could about the people, because one of the tricks about that New Mexico deployment was that there are Indian reservations there, and Indian reservations are governed autonomously to the rest of the state. So we had to deal with both Governor Martinez as well as the governor of the tribe. The chief, and they have equal power. So that was an interesting one, but that's the one I would think would probably be the fastest. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So I have a question, if you can hear me okay.
Yeah,
Hi.
sure. Hi, Kenneth.
So unfortunately, in my day, a lot of times I get hit. Kenneth, hey, you. I answered any of it, really.
Oh, fine.
Or as my wife says, you're the reason we don't have nice things. Is so she a lot of times in my day, I find myself, and I don't know about anyone else on with us, of you're just hit like nonstop with it. Sometimes you just find yourself listening to respond versus listening to understand.
Mhm.
And so, what are some techniques you found to really craft more towards the listening to understand versus listening to respond? Because unfortunately, you have some of those that are just, it's the same consistent response every time. And that's more of a listening to respond versus really listening to get to the heart of what that root cause of that problem actually is.
Yeah,
So,
and sometimes I do struggle with this because I do struggle with the listening to respond versus the listening to understand at times. But I think the answer I would provide is the question asking again. That when I'm listening to understand, I'm asking questions as we go, and I know it drives people crazy, and a lot of times I sort of think out loud also, but yeah, I mean, I'll tell you another trick I used, and I actually learned this in, of all things, scholarship programs, also known as beauty pageants, interviews, that a trick is when you get asked a question in an interview, is if the trick is, if you don't know the answer, that you repeat the question to make sure that you understand it, to give yourself a little bit more time to come up with the answer, because the brain can work that fast. But I do repeat, I will say the actual words to people. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then whatever, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're saying blah, blah, blah. I am commonly doing that in a conversation. And I think what I'm hoping to communicate, besides my sort of, facial expressions, my nonverbal communication, that I am engaged and that you are important to me and that I am listening to you. I think that those communicate those questions that I ask, and the way that I reiterate, like, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is that right? Because sometimes I'm not right, and that's fabulous to find out. Okay, so I completely misunderstood you. You were saying X, and I was hearing Y, and I mean, how many marriages would still be together if the communication went like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always when you have when you're missing information, what do people do? They fill in their own information. They make their own.
Oh my God, never truer words spoken. Yes, in the void of information, they make it up and try to pass it off as facts. And I
That's
think
right.
witnessed that. Yeah.
I think it was
Recently.
Julie who mentioned earlier too about sometimes you just have a whole lot of words and there's no context to anything that's in that conversation. And so I'd find myself like, listening to just kind of respond because you didn't hear anything that caught that I need to actually dig into this a little further. And then it sometimes, and there's been a few times that's circled back to me a little later on. And it's been like, you know what? They did bring that up. Let me kind of gather a little bit more facts and get back with you. And it was just because maybe they didn't frame that message in a way that it just stuck the way it should have. So
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, lots of people talk in circles and say nothing. Absolutely. Miss Jefferson, did you have a question? Oh, okay. You're muted. Do you think she has mute on her computer, John?
It's not muted on this end.
Right. I wonder if she muted herself by accident. Mm-mm.
you might have to touch the sound button and give it permission to talk to your
What
headset.
about
I had
now?
to,
Oh, yay, yay.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So I just had a question. You mentioned a book by Malcolm Gladwell. I think it
Yeah,
was
tipping point.
Tipping Point. And you mentioned that there were a few guys before Paul Revere came on the scene. And my question is, what would your advice be to them? Sort of like when you're trying to get something through and nobody's listening because you may not have the influence that Paul Revere has yet. You may not have had the time to sort of develop the trust or build
Right.
the trust with people. So what would your advice be to the
Yeah, I think my advice to them would have been to drop Paul's name. Would have been to say, hey, Paul Revere says the British are coming, and he sent me to tell you. Then you probably got some more cred,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's right. That's right. I see you laughing, Lily, and you've been really quiet.
Yes, ma'am. I guess I would go and ask my question. I wanted to know, like, in your experience, like, have you had any barriers in, say, for instance, change leadership? Have you run into any barriers that were persistent in your endeavors?
Yeah, Southern men. and I say that only half jokingly. Yeah, I'm from Northern Indiana, right on the Michigan line. I went to school obviously in mid-Missouri and then came down here. I got my master's degree from the University of Southern California. And so I'm not from here. And even though I've lived here 28 years, there is definitely a category. Now, I'm not generalizing by any means, but there are definitely some older white Southern males in positions here on the coast who don't necessarily want to hear about how things could be different or should be different. And they certainly don't want a damn Yankee female telling them, right? So yeah, I mean that has been some, but I will tell you, I usually have had more of the people supporting me than there were those. And so quite frankly, it was the other old white Southern men who weren't a part of that traditional group who sort of provided cover, if you will. So they sort of, and that's sort of what has a little bit, to a little bit of an extent, what's happened at the chamber. There are people who did not want to see any change. But the people who did want to see change were vocal enough and savvy enough and strategic enough that they were able to pave the way for me to make the change that I needed. So that's another thing too. There are certain things that I would like to change that I haven't found my way to do at this point, because I don't think I would have the backing that would be needed at this point to do it. Not to get political, but the whole state flag change was something where I and my chamber and I came out earlier rather than later on taking a stance that we needed that change. And it didn't make everybody happy, but my board of directors hired me for 3 reasons. And 2 of them were to make the chamber bolder. And the other one was to be more policy driven. So there you have it. You wanted bold and you wanted policy driven. Well, there it is. So yeah. And there are a lot of people who played a role in getting that flag changed. And I played a small role helping the state legislators from our area would call me and tell me what votes they still didn't have. And then I and some other people would work behind the scenes to get those votes changed. So I played a small role in helping make that happen. And it may go down, however long I live, as one of my proudest moments. And the Lieutenant Governor Hoseman presented me and the chamber with a signed flag by him, and it is now framed in our chamber lobby. Yeah, that was big.
Paige, we have a hand up. Carlos?
Paige, I'm going to reveal a few things. You guys, we have been in the trenches really, and it's not bad, but we have really been in the trenches in our careers, and we have went through every pillar that we've talked about tonight. Paige, can you enlighten us about the Jackson 5?
I knew where you were going, to the cruise ship. I knew right where you were going.
Well, no. The formation of it and how
okay,
how the positive what came out of that and how we developed it. Yeah,
agreeing to go to incident command. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, I was the executive director of the American Red Cross chapter that oversaw Jackson and George counties. And when a disaster hits, I don't know how it is now, but in 2005, there's an incident command system that's a very structured, very military. Kenneth is nodding. He probably knows about it. There's an incident command system that actually started with the firefighters on how you handle disaster and who reports to whom and how all the information gets conjoined and distributed and dispersed and all of that. So the counties, the 3 coastal counties, Hancock, Harrison, and Jackson, the Board of Supervisors in each of those counties was given the option of whether they wanted to adopt the incident command system. And Jackson County was the only one who did. And I have never been prouder of our county leadership than when they did that, because it did create what became the Jackson 5. And that was the 2 city managers and the 2 full-time mayors, in addition to the county administrator. So that made the 5 from Jackson County, who were the hub of all things. Now there was a team, mind you, there was a national team of incident command experts that FEMA sent down, Sid Melton and a whole group of them, who came down for weeks and weeks and weeks to help put it in place. But then the moment came when they would leave and go home, and the Jackson 5 would then have been appropriately prepared to lead the rest of the recovery. Because by then you could argue we were out of, well, somewhat, I don't know, maybe you could argue we were still in response and not yet fully into recovery. But anyway, by the time they leave, you're pretty much more in recovery. But that worked very well. And that is the kind of thing also with change leadership, is you must be mindful of the territorialism that's already rooted and the fiefdoms that already exist. And it's not that you're going in to necessarily uproot it all, but you are trying to ease your way in there to dissolve some of that. And let me tell you, it's nearly impossible to do in the state of New Jersey because each little township has their own emergency management director, their own fire chief, their own police chief, and it's just, anyway, New Jersey is that's a trick, that state. Yeah, know the landscape. See, what did you need me for, John? You're muted now, John.
I was going to say, that's just, as you were talking, that's what popped into my head. Know the landscape, know who's doing who to what, and owns what, and stands to lose.
Yeah, and use anyone and everyone who's been there before you to tell you where the landmines are, because it saves a lot of time, right? And so that's why it was helpful when I called my buddy Rick in New Mexico, because he could tell me where the landmines were about, especially dealing with the tribes. Because yes, we have Indian tribes here, but I don't deal with them on a regular basis. So yeah.
Yes. Well, Paige, I just want to say on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for the time you spent. It was very valuable to us, and actually fun. A whole lot.
Oh, thanks. Oh, thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. And Carlos, if I don't hear from you soon, you know I'm going to have you found and brought to me. I've started a new thing, John, where you have to come kiss the ring at the chamber.
Oh, no, I understand. I understand. All right.
I'm just kidding.
You got buy-in on that?
Some people are kissing the ring. Yes, they are.
As well they should.
All right, well, you guys go forth and lead some change. I'm excited for you.
There's plenty of that out there, I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, plenty of change that's needed, but the right change in the right way. So you can always read Good to Great by Jim Collins too. That's another one.
Absolutely.
All right, have a good evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. let's take about a 5-minute break and we'll wrap up. Everybody ready for that? I know I am. Okay, let's see. So I guess the most silly or the silliest question I could possibly ask right now is, everybody back? Because I can't see. If I could see what I could see on this thing, let's see. Ah, there's life. I lost my chat tool, so there's no way for me to know, but I'm going to assume because it's been about 5 minutes. Love what you talked about. A lot of good stuff there, especially about communication and how key that is. And you never know about all those behind the scene things that happen unless you're actually involved with them. You know, I can, for myself, I could tell you during the whole flag build up and finally you know, it passed up in Jackson and all this other stuff. I was hanging. I was like hanging from a thread, wondering if that thing was going to pass. And what I didn't realize was just all the people like Paige and others working behind the scenes to convince folks that, you know, it's the right thing to do. Go ahead and do it. You know, go ahead and make the vote. So I thought that was great. Anyway, I do want to tell you that due to time, I'm going to table one of our agenda items, and that's the transformational leadership, because that was a bit longer than I had anticipated. And I do promise I will take better control of the time next time, because 2 of you are actually going to be speaking. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So I did want to touch on the switch 3-part change framework because it's really relevant to changes that you make for yourselves and changes that you try to help other people through. You remember we had talked about transitions last time and how people have, you know, different levels of moving through a change event, which may be, you know, in total denial to anger, all the way through to finally to accepting it. And well, we wonder why that happens. And this gives us a nice view of it. This is Switch by the Heath Brothers. It's Chip and Dan, not to be confused. I won't even say it. Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, so basically what they point out to is that the mind is divided into 3 parts, like the rider on an elephant. And basically the rider's job is to serve the elephant. So that comes from that quote. And here's how this thing goes. The rider represents our rational minds. This is our computer selves. This is the part that uses logic and wants to know what needs to be done so that it can be done, the planner, basically. Then there's the elephant. That's our emotional selves. And this is where the metaphor comes in really well. You may know what the right thing to do or the thing you want to do is, but your emotions are much larger than you. Much like a rider, 150-pound rider on top of a 2-ton elephant, you know, who's going to win that argument, right? A lot of times it's your emotions. Most of the time, it will be. If the elephant wants to go someplace, that's where you're going to go. And we have examples of that all the time. I kind of relayed last time we had a student that was working on her personal change challenge, and we had the mixer, and the bread pudding was something that kept her from doing what she needed to do that night. That was her elephant, running away. And then, of course, the path being in the environment. How do we set ourselves up for success is very important. And in your change challenge, your personal change challenge, that's going to be something that you want to look at. How do I set myself up for success? You know, to use the idea of trying to lose a few pounds, if that's what you're doing, or exercising more. You know, what kind of environment do you set up? How do you fill your pantry, for instance, would be one way to set your environment up so that you're set up for success. So direct the rider. Basically, the rider needs to know where to go and what to do without the ambiguity. What that means is having a plan. What do I need to do to get from here to there? And that's why you have your worksheets to work through how you're going to deal with, you know, at an individual, social level, and also an environmental level of making your change work. Motivate the elephant. You want to appeal to the elephant's emotions. The elephant needs to feel the journey is possible. Oh, I can make it. Make progress. Celebrate the small steps, victories along the way. You're not going to get the elephant up down the entire path all in one step. There has to be like milestones that gets the elephant there. And of course, set the rider up and the elephant up for a successful journey. So these are 3 simple ideas, as Paige had mentioned to you, that can be very helpful when you're trying to manage your own change or you're trying to help others manage a change. So it's, I just wanted to recap that because it was one of the things that I thought, you know, with all the reading that you're doing and all the thoughts and ideas about change and all the various change models, this breaks all of that down into a very simple formula that anyone can pick up and run away with, right? So just kind of bear that in mind. The other one that I liked, and we kind of talked about, well, you wrote about it. In fact, I'm through half of them right now, grading them, your discussion board about make change easy, and the banana and the orange and friction, and how you can use friction to your advantage to change behavior for the good, or to prevent a bad habit or bad behavior from continuing. And I thought I thought this is relevant to the same kind of discussion. So in a personal change challenge, remember we talked about setting a goal, or having, you know, what results you wanted, finding those vital behaviors that'll get you there, or those few things that can lead to your success, and then of course to deal with the 6 sources of influence on a personal, social, and structural or environmental, if you will, level. And then we talk about our motivation and ability to get there. You may recall personal motivation, keep your goal out in front of you. Personal ability, learn something new that will help you reach your goal. Social motivation, harness peer pressure, turn your accomplices into friends. I don't know if you took the opportunity to view the video that was on the assignment page, but it does a nice job of laying out what that means. And a lot of times we talk to our friends, and instead of tempting you with the thing that you're trying to avoid, be more supportive in that, or in what you're trying to accomplish. Social ability, find strength in numbers, get help from others. You might go to a specialist, a coach. I might have mentioned this last time. I had a student who was trying to become more physically active and fit, and he went ahead and hired an online coach to work him through that, and he was very successful. Structural motivation, design rewards, and demand accountability. This is very important. So you want to directly link your short-term rewards and punishments to the new habits. Think friction, if you will, from the Harvard Business Review article. What are your oranges? What are your bananas? And how will you leverage those to keep yourself on track? And then structural ability, make small changes that have a big impact, changes to your environment. And sometimes a few visual cues might be all you need. So those were that. And so I just wanted to kind of go around the room and ask y'all, how is it going? Just some things to touch on. You know, those, you know, if anybody wants to share, you know, what are you changing? What kinds of personal, social, structural motivation and abilities have you mobilized or planning to mobilize to help yourself? What are your vital few behaviors, crucial moments that you want to that you know that you have to deal with? Any difficulties you've encountered? Any aha moments perhaps that you had?
I'll go, Dr. K. I'm working on trying to sleep more. I have a mandate from my doctor that requires that, but
and I'm not helping, right?
yeah. So I guess that's the undesirable. I'm trying to make it desirable. I do have the tendency to try to use all the hours of the 24 offered. So I am trying to like I've been trying to set a cutoff time. Sometimes, some days have been better than others. I actually, because I'm more of a night person, I actually start later so I can go later because it works better. I think that I made that adjustment at some point in the recent past. And I tried to like make everybody that is in my circle aware of this particular goal and mandate. I want to call it that because it actually is. And I don't know if there's been any like social aspect of it besides that. And I don't know. I'm not going to say I've celebrated any of the accomplishments either because they've been very, very minimal. I guess the only thing I can say is that I have tried not to like overreact to not being able to do it. That would probably be the best thing I can say about that. And then I do have like all kinds of structural cues. I have more sticky notes and glass boards and all kinds of stuff to remind me. Clocks, we have like 1,000 clocks around here now. So, I mean, that's where I am at this point.
So I think what I hear is you have a plan and you're doing the best you can to stick with it. You mentioned that some things get in the way every once in a while.
Yes.
Should I apologize?
No. No.
Well, it's good that you have a sense of humor about those things, because the fact of the matter is, any of us that have gone through any kind of a change, a self-directed change, a transformation, if you will, we all experience setbacks. It's going to happen. It's what is your plan B? How do you plan to recover from that setback and enact that plan that actually makes a difference? So,
right.
Good luck, and I wish you rest.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
Dr. K, mine would probably be, it's weird how I came up with this, but it's because I'm relentlessly positive, even in work settings in bad situations. It tends to sometimes cloud my judgment on people's character. And so I try to see or vision every person at their best, even if they're not at that moment. And so sometimes sometimes I have to accept the situation and where that other person is at the time, and not, lean in more for trying to pull out the best in them when they're not really there at that point.
So what kind of things have you put in place to help yourself?
Actually, I took some notes and I was like, yep. The listening more and gathering the knowledge of that, or whatever's coming out of that person's mouth, and not listening to respond, in a sense, I think Kenneth said at one point. So
Yeah, those are all good tips. So, there are certain habits that you can change that would help, I would think.
And I actually bite my lip when I feel myself talking while that person is still talking. So I really try to take a second breath and let them finish And if there's a response, I'll respond. One thing that I have implemented I used to be a college basketball referee, and having the body language of being approachable, and also facial expression, but also with the sign language that referee use on a court to communicate. But when it's time to talk, it's not a lost or I try to gain the trust and the buy-in from the coaches and players by not talking. But when I do talk, it's a moment that they will stop and listen.
Very good.
Yep.
Hi, Dr. K.
Hi there. Thank you, Carlos.
My personal challenge has to do with diet change, weight loss, exercise. The exercise portion, since it's freezing in Georgia right now, has been kind of held up a little. I wake up with the intention to get up and walk in my neighborhood, and I'm struggling with that part of it. The diet change, though, I have been successful. I was in my refrigerator last night throwing out things, cleaning out my pantry, getting rid of stuff, processed flour, sugar, all those things. I dumped it. My husband woke up this morning and said, "You threw away all that?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's gone. We can't eat that anymore." So I've been successful with that. But my husband is bringing muffins and cakes and pies and cookies, but I've done really well. I haven't
Very
given in. I'm sticking to my diet.
outstanding. You know, it's great how you're trying to change your environment to make it a little bit easier for you to get what you need. The other part of that is all those carbs are they're addictive.
They are.
It's like, yeah, it's like what did I hear it compared to? Like what's the most addictive thing you can think of? Whatever that
Ooh,
is, right?
yeah,
Like heroin
yeah,
or something, you know, crack cocaine or something.
yeah.
No, it'll light your brain up when you get a little bit of sugar and you're like, oh, I want more of that.
Yeah.
I know what you're going through. I've been through it.
Ooh, ooh.
And I spent some time, and my wife and I have spent some time learning how to do that, and followed this idea very successfully. And she had lost 90 pounds. I've lost 75,
Wow.
and it's made a big difference. So that's a positive life change that you're making there. I'm right there.
Thank you.
So
Thank
keep doing things. And as far as the
Thank
cold goes, it'll warm up eventually.
Yes, it will.
And there may be other alternatives that you can use, right?
Yeah, like a treadmill. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Fewer biscuits and more treadmill. You know, it works out in the end.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sandra. Appreciate that. All right. Everybody doesn't have to share. Is there anybody that wants to? Kenneth?
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut off Jenna though. She raised her hand just now, but she's like,
Oh,
no,
Jenna.
go ahead.
I can't see everybody because I've got this thing going on here with this the Zoom.
She's waving me on, so I'm gonna go
Okay.
ahead and go. And if she interrupts, then I'll stop and she can go next. So
Yeah, like the guy at
Yeah.
the intersection waving you through. Yeah, just go ahead.
I think the one I really want to focus on is really kind of learning to let go of what I can't control in my role versus what I can control. And the reason why I say that is a lot of times I find myself not really getting what I would say frustrated or mad over something, but it's like, am I upset over this situation because it's not the way that I would handle it, or am I upset because it's fundamentally wrong in how you're interacting with students at a college level? And so for myself, a lot of times it's because it's not the way that I would necessarily handle it, or I'm in my position, I'm not necessarily in any way being able to control that. And so a lot of times, they bypass those student pathways and come straight to the equivalent of the superintendent's office. And there's nothing that you can really do but send those individuals back to the beginning again and start that process over, knowing that some of those things that you hear are absolutely preventable things that you can't interject into those scenarios, and there's really not a lot you can do other than, I keep a notebook somewhere that should I ever find myself back at the college level again, and I will one day hope to be back at a college level again, of what I would call like a playbook of, here are the things I know absolutely work from what I've seen so far, and here are the things that if I see them, we've got to course correct these things because they're just fundamentally wrong. And so, as you kind of go down the hallway, sometimes those folks, they share that load on you, knowing very well that you're almost like a chaplain at some point where they're sharing their woes with you.
Right.
But there's nothing that you can do about that. And so you find yourself, unfortunately, staring at the ceiling, watching the ceiling fan go at night, thinking about all those things that you really can't control these situations.
Right. And if you can't control them and they're eating at you, that could be a very unhealthy thing, right? Absolutely. Well, I wish you success in making that change. What have you put in place to help?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. It's okay.
And I say that only because, quite honestly, the wheels are always turning. And, as my wife likes to joke with me a little bit of, we can't leave the house until Dad's got an ink pen and there's something in the car to write with in case something pops up. And, you don't ever really find me without an ink pen and scribbling some little mad note on a bar napkin somewhere. And maybe not a cocktail, or, I'm not hanging out in the bars, but just of things that you start thinking about things. And it's like, I love to read books cover to cover to cover. And it's just like, you start jotting these ideas down somewhere, but there's no way to implement those. There's no way to share those things either. So,
But you write them down.
Yeah, we write them down. And, I think from my role at the system office, we develop these really cool, innovative things that when they're passed, unfortunately, down, and that's where I'm finding a lot of my frustration right now, is we pass a lot of things down that we should have involved people on the ground with in the beginning. And so, as I read through both Cotter's and Passmore, it was just kind of like, and even the Meerkat book, I don't know if anyone's got a chance to finish that one yet. That was a great one. There's a lot of my workplace in just about every single one of those books that may kind of point the direction of why that frustration is there. So
no, it sounds like you're on the trail, and I don't know, I hear journaling's a good thing to do.
Hard to keep up with.
Hard to keep up with, but may be worthwhile depending on your situation. Well, I wish you luck with that. I'm looking forward to reading all of your personal change challenge updates, reactions at the end of the course. But I just kind of wanted to check in, see what you were doing and how it's going. I mean, that's important. Thank you. Well, we are running out of time. So let me kind of press through here. Upcoming change. I like this cartoon. I don't even know who I stole it from. I know I'm supposed to have like used with permission from somebody over here, but it's just us folks. So don't beat me up too much. Yeah, a lot deeper than last time. Okay, you're probably painfully aware of what you have coming up. Of course, Paige Roberts Insights. You're going to do a discussion board on that one. That should be a fun one for you to do. And I'm looking forward to reading those. Harvard Business Review change case study. Welcome aboard, but don't change a thing. That's kind of a wild and woolly ride. I think you'll get a lot out of that one. Next week, of course, we'll have case studies, PowerPoint presentations starting on our next meeting. We'll have 2 of those and a guest speaker. So I'm going to have to hold my guest speaker to the time. Absolutely, for sure. And then that guest speaker, of course, being Dr. Janae McDonald, and she's pretty good about time. She'll be on that next discussion board for a guest speaker. And then, I wanted to tell you, I was in touch with John Bentley. We send messages back and forth on Messenger. He said a lot of people showed up on Sunday, and he sent me some resources that I'm going to go ahead and post up on our Canvas site. As far as videos and exercises and things like that from the last session. So look for that. I'll go ahead and get it posted most likely tomorrow. Okay, the big schedule is here. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, this is who we have coming up. Of course, Carlos and Julie are going to be next. And this also is in Canvas. If you want to look at the schedule, if I PowerPoint, and of course will be up as a PowerPoint. It's already up there as a PDF. But if you go across, find your name, say, oh my gosh, you have me on the wrong date or the wrong topic or whatever, let me know. I'll fix it. It's not a big deal. Easily done. Okay. The one thing I'll ask you, if you are scheduled, to please upload your PowerPoints in Canvas by midnight the night before, so we can have them handy. That's going to be important to us. So that's all about that. References for, well, mostly for the things I didn't talk about, and that was the transformational leadership. I will table that until a more opportune time. And that is it for this evening. Thank you for your patience. I know the technology wasn't cooperative, although I do have a question for Kenneth. We started the meeting and then you didn't see it, but I'm the moderator of the meeting, right? I own the meeting and I get this message from Zoom flash up for me, you know, and basically what the message said was, you've already gone over the 40-minute time limit. We're going to go ahead and waive it. What do you think of that? And it gave you a button to click, you know, so yeah, I love it. Have you seen that before? No.
No, I've not seen that before. On my side, when we're setting it up, we have early last year, somewhere around March or April, we were able to utilize some of those CARES Act funds to really kind of help fund a corporate license for Zoom, because you know,
Right.
Unfortunately, it isn't one of those good discounted platforms. I mean, if we should have in hindsight all bought stock last year in Zoom and Microsoft Teams and some of those other items, but you know, we had that limit that's on there, and I've just always just left it alone, and it's never timed me out. But I've seen where on sometimes the free models, it will try and pop up that timer that says you can only do it for about 30 minutes and then you got to get back off again.
All right. So from USM, does not have this yet. I'm pretty sure. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to come up with another platform. It is not going to be the WebEx. It's just not panning out for us, I don't think. So
Teams works pretty
look
good.
at perhaps using Teams next time and see if that works any better for us. So, yeah, stand by. Things are going to change, right? No matter what. That's inevitable. But
I've used the Teams app on the iPhone before, and it's worked very well, especially if I'm on the road and
yes,
somebody's asking me to pull over somewhere and jump on a Teams meeting.
yes.
You can at least see things. Now, I've never tried to switch documents before if I had to do a share screen, but as far as being able to see what's being presented and talk to people, it's kind of worked from a phone. I've not tried it from like a tablet though.
I've used it from a phone and from the computer, and it's worked well for meetings and that, but I need to find out, and I'll make a few calls and find out our guest speakers, you know, if they're not in our system, can they get in? How do they get in? That kind of thing. And then I'll coordinate with our guest speakers on how to make that work. Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Boy, I do like Zoom though. Maybe one day we'll buy it. We'll buy our corporate license for the university.
I was afraid you were going to call me out on the flash up of the Star Wars background, and then it disappeared just as quickly. And I'm like, well, that might have been why that camera went mute for a moment.
Yeah, so. I was observing that. I was actually amused, and I appreciate it. You know, every once in a while you're like, oh, okay, good. I'm not the only one. All right, y'all. Have a great night. Thanks so much. And I'll post the recording. I'll link to the recording for this, okay? And you all have a great night.
Sir, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.